Okay, so I'm going to address the issues in reverse order and start with education. And the proposition talks about the Democrats trying to make education affordable to all, and unfortunately this is just an unrealistic goal, and the Republican parties recognize this and want to go from there. So take for instance California, which has a Democrat-controlled governor, state senate, and state assembly. Right now, Cal State is freezing tuition for next year. UC has drastically raised their tuition, and the community college system is also dramatically raising their fees because they can't afford to educate their students. So why can't people afford to go to college? Because the government can't afford to send everybody to college. But this doesn't mean that conceding this fact, under Republican Party leadership, we're going to end up with only high-income, wealthy students being able to go to college, right? Why? Because scholarships and grants will still be in existence, and low-income students will be able to access those grants. And how do they best access those grants? By getting good grades in school. And the Republicans want to invest in private education. And in with private educators, low-income students have a much higher rate of success in terms of grades and overall performance than in the failing public schools of our public education system. So under the Democratic plan, we can continue to hold on to this notion that every single person is going to be able to afford to go to college, in which we end up with a system like California, in which students can't even apply, or they have to reduce the amount of time they spend in school because they simply can't afford it. Or we can go with the Republican plan, in which a significant number of low-income students get to go to college, but also we recognize that that's not the only road to success, right? You can start a small business, you can just get a job out of high school and still be able to be on that road to success without burdening states like California with excessive costs. As far as social issues are concerned, the proposition would have you believe, like she said, that for the past 50 years, the Republicans have been on the wrong side of every single issue, and therefore they will continue to be forever and ever. But this isn't true. If we want to go, I'm going to use the proposition's own example in her first speech, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, for which a majority of the Republicans in the House and Senate voted in favor of. And that act was paved the way, not just by the civil rights movement, but by the politicians in power. And who was the politician in power right before that act passed, who spearheaded many of the civil rights legislation in the American Congress at that time? It was President John F. Kennedy, who was a Republican. So if we're going to go back that far, I'm going to make that argument. As far as more Americans being registered Democratic than Republican, you can switch around the numbers just as easily, right? 37% of Americans are conservative, 21% identify as liberal. As far as independent voters go, it's about the same ratio, 37% conservative, 21% liberal. As far as, I'll even go back to the proposition's first speech in which she talks about women's rights. 37% of women identify as conservative, 23% identify as liberal. Where are you more likely to stand on social issues, with your party or with your ideology? With your ideology. The Republicans have not the majority, but a greater number than the Democratic Party do in terms of ideology. In any way, Republicans aren't all anti-gay marriage and pro-life. The proposition would have you believe that if Republicans were allowed leadership, that we're going to end up with a president who's a Christian evangelical from the Ozarks who's against civil rights. But that's not true. If you want evidence, look at the presidential debate. Moderate Republicans are more likely to lead. Why? Because they take reasonable stances on education and social issues while still supporting a free market-based economy in which we support middle class and low class and small business. What the Republicans do, contrary to what the proposition would have you believe, Republicans do support these classes, right? For instance, removing limits on tax-free savings accounts so our citizens can save more. This affects middle and working classes much more than it affects the wealthy class, because the wealthy doesn't worry about their savings account as much as the middle and working class, who are going to be heavily affected by regulations on their savings accounts, and we want them to save money so they're prepared for the future. And the Republicans also eliminated the estate tax for small businesses and farmers who had to compete with large corporations. Again, this doesn't really affect large corporations because they don't have to worry about the estate tax, whereas small businesses and farmers who are inheriting land do have to worry about the estate tax, and the Republicans eliminated this. So why are the Republicans best to lead the country into the future? Because they take reasonable issues on the economy, on social issues, and on education, and the Democrats do not. So this is why the Republican Party is best to lead America into the future, and I'd like to thank the proposition for a great debate. Thank you.